I'm going to tell you something very counterintuitive. You can be 100 days free from pornography and still be totally failing at actually recovering. I have seen this in myself and in the men that I work with. I've watched people hit 100 days porn-free, seemingly thinking that they've made it out of the woods, while in reality their addiction was just kind of lying dormant like a volcano underneath the surface, building pressure, waiting for the right trigger to explode. They've quit porn, but that's really the only change that they've made in their life. They are sober, but miserable. One bad day away from total relapse. This pattern is so common in recovery as to be basically guaranteed for people to fall into during their first attempts to quit porn. And beyond porn addiction, this is a well-known phenomenon in addiction recovery in general. So much so that 12-step program Alcoholics Anonymous has a famous saying that sober is not well. And they coined this type of person the dry drunk, the person who has managed to put down the bottle, but then never actually did the underlying work of recovery to heal the roots. And so what this person ends up doing is a phenomenon that we call white knuckling, which is exerting willpower and force in isolation to try to deprive themselves of the behavior that they're trying to change. And if that kind of sounds like you right now, I want to talk to you about what it is that you're actually doing versus what it is that you think you're doing. In the next few minutes, I want to walk you through a diagnostic test, something that I call the 3 a.m. test, that will show you exactly where you're actually at in your recovery journey. I want to walk you through the critical differences between white knuckling and real recovery, the 4 questions which reveal which one you're actually doing right now, why willpower will always fail you, and it's not because you're weak, what actually creates lasting freedom from pornography, and finally, the counterintuitive action that will actually begin to change things for you. So let's dive into it. Imagine that it's 3 a.m. You can't sleep. You're alone with your thoughts. No accountability partner, if you have one, there for you. No blockers between you and your phone or your laptop. No one to stay sober for. Just you and the present moment and the truth. Imagining yourself in this moment, I want you to ask yourself these 4 questions. And I mean really ask them. Your honest answers are going to tell you everything that you need to know. Question 1. Do I actively feel like I am at war with myself? The core paradigm that white knuckling comes out of is what could best be described as like the war fighter mentality. We think that we're going to be able to create the emotional, psychological change that we're seeking through the exertion of force, almost like violent force, trying to willpower, beat, and pressure ourselves into changing. If you're white knuckling every day is a battle against yourself and against the urges. You wake up fighting. You go to bed fighting. Your whole day is structured around avoiding triggers, resisting temptation, white knuckling and powering your way through cravings. You're constantly on guard against sexual thoughts and temptations, constantly vigilant, constantly exhausted. And so you're not experiencing the sobriety from pornography as relief or as connection or as finally finding emotional soothing. You're experiencing it as a grind, as a war, as a punishment, as something you kind of just have to grit your teeth and hopefully make it through. But the way that you know you're in actual recovery, as they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, is that you've ceased fighting everything, even pornography. In recovery, we do not use force and willpower as the tools to create change. In recovery, we recognize that addiction is not a willpower deficiency disorder. You're not in this situation because you haven't beat the shit out of yourself enough. There is no amount of going to war against yourself or the cravings or the addiction that is ever going to result in the peace that you are looking for. You're no longer in constant combat mode, and you're beginning to heal what is creating the urges at the root level in the first place. You're building a life that is actually worth living, that is worth being present for. And the energy that used to go into fighting and depriving and resisting all the urges is now going into creating things that matter to you and that actually meet the underlying needs. The perceived battlefield that you have lived in your entire life is starting to shrink because you're actually addressing the wounds that put you there. Question number 2, how do I feel about myself at the core? The pattern that I've consistently seen is that if you're white knuckling, you are actively carrying a massive amount of shame and self-hatred. You might have days, weeks, or even months clean, but you still fundamentally believe that you are some kind of broken, weak, deficient person. The shame hasn't actually shifted or healed. It's just temporarily gone underground, waiting for you to slip up and for this facade of control to crack so it can come rushing back to the surface. And you basically find yourself having to perform sobriety while also kind of hating yourself for having to perform it. Like this ongoing battle that you're engaged in every single day is tied to the perception that you're still an addicted, broken person. Like, does that make sense? That every action that you're taking in your day-to-day life is coming out of a place where you only need to take those actions because you're a deficient person. And then every urge that comes up is just yet another reminder that you're still that person, still fundamentally flawed. But in actual recovery, we shift out of a paradigm, we shift out of a core belief of shame and into self-compassion. In recovery, you're starting to understand that you never developed an addiction because you were a bad person. You're not here because you're a bad person trying to get good. You are here because you are a sick person trying to get well. And that's a huge difference. The shame is dissolving because you start to see shame for the lie that it is. And you're finally addressing what created that belief system in the first place. You're learning that your addiction was never a moral failure. It was always about pain and emotional distress and unmet needs that you did not know how to process or meet. You begin feeling pulled into change, not by shame or anger or self-hatred or beating yourself up with a stick, but through compassion, through kindness, and through loving accountability. Question number 3, can I actually feel my emotions? If you're caught in white knuckling, then what's happening usually is, well, you're still numb. You are running. You're still escaping. You've maybe just changed what you're running to. Instead of pornography, you're now distracting yourself, running desperately towards work, or maybe it's the gym, maybe it's video games or food, or somehow constantly trying to keep yourself distracted and busy. But the fundamental pattern of your life is still avoiding being with yourself in the present moment, still avoiding feeling what is here, still avoiding feeling what you need to feel. You may have removed the pornography temporarily, but you haven't done anything to address your capacity to deal with the pain that is there when the pornography recedes. So now you're without the one thing that was providing you something approximating soothing and connection, and you've left yourself with all of the pain. As I said earlier, sober but miserable. When you're in actual recovery, you're learning the skills to be able to recognize, attend to, and respond to your emotions without needing to escape them anymore. Anxiety doesn't automatically trigger the urge to go use pornography anymore. Loneliness does not send you spiraling. Stress does not require self-destructive relief. You're leveraging relationships and practices in order to build something called co-regulation and affect tolerance. This is the ability to leverage relationships in order to process our emotional needs, and then tools and practices to be able to feel without getting overwhelmed and feeling the need to numb, to be able to experience our emotions and respond to them rather than escape them. And that cultivated capacity is what creates actual freedom. And question number 4, am I actively building a life I don't want to escape from? If you're actively white knuckling, your life is usually the same as it was when you were using, just minus the porn. Same isolation, same emptiness, same lack of meaning or connection or purpose. You're just enduring that existential emptiness sober now. Sobriety is basically synonymous with pain, like you're chewing glass, which is why you're one bad day away from developing the fuck-its and going right back. Leaving yourself with all of the pain and none of the soothing is why you keep failing. But when you're in actual recovery, you are actively creating a life of meaning and connection and purpose. You are actively building relationships. You're pursuing things that matter to you. You're discovering who you are and expressing yourself beyond the life of addiction. You're constructing a life that you don't feel the need to escape from because it's actually a life worth being present for and worth living. Recovery is not about removing pornography. It's about building something better in its place so the need for pornography falls away entirely on its own. And now if you've been free from pornography for some time, I want to leave you with a 5th bonus question. Because like I said, I have seen people, myself included, be sober for a long time without ever actually having healed the emotional roots that created the problem in the first place, only to later, months down the line, have one bad day that sends them cascading back into addiction for months or years before they end up with a long period of sobriety again? And that question is this: if you removed all of your blocking, all of your accountability right now, what would happen? If you're white knuckling, that open opportunity would start to feel like a thorn in your side. Within days, maybe hours, you would find yourself battling the compulsion and resisting the urge to use once more. And that's because your sobriety has been built entirely on ducks in a row, on external controls, on needing everything in your environment outside of yourself to be perfect. And so if I take one of your ducks and I get it out of line, everything falls apart. So you haven't healed what created the compulsion. You've just built a dam around it. But when you've been in actual recovery and you've been engaging in healing the roots, eventually, maybe not in early recovery, but eventually you'd be fine. Not because you're superhuman, not because you finally cultivated the magic amount of willpower and discipline to be able to resist the urge to watch pornography, but because you no longer need or want porn in your life. An identity level transformation has occurred, a change in personality sufficient to result in the phenomenon of recovery has occurred, a life of connection has been built that is worth being present for, the wounds of trauma and shame have been healed, and the compulsion has dissolved because you addressed at a fundamental level what created it in the first place. This is not an invitation to go run that experiment to see what happens, but from a hypothetical perspective, this is the real or the ultimate test of whether recovery has happened in your life or whether you are white knuckling. Recovery makes the external controls useful, perhaps, but ultimately unnecessary, because the internal need for escape has been healed. You have heard me say this before, and you will hear me say it again and again and again, because this lesson needs to keep being learned. So listen to me closely. Porn was never your problem. Porn was your solution to loneliness, your solution to stress, your solution to trauma that you didn't know how to process, your solution to disconnection, boredom, shame, inadequacy, a life that had become a blur of adult responsibilities, every week looking the same as the last, all the pain, all the emotions that you did not know how to sit with and respond to, all of the needs that you've never known how to meet in healthy ways, the spiritual disconnection from a higher sense of meaning and purpose. And when you try to create recovery and healing by simply removing the solution without addressing what it was solving, you are creating a pressure cooker, building towards explosion. That is why willpower will always fail. That is why discipline and white knuckling and deprivation will never get you to where you're trying to go. You're trying to remove the pressure release valve while not addressing what's creating the pressure. And so that pressure will continue to build and rebuild and rebuild and rebuild and continue to find a way out. The healing of the fundamental roots of addiction require two things which seem counterintuitive, and they run directly opposite to our intuitions about what should, we think, create the change that we're seeking. Those two things are surrender and connection. Surrender does not mean giving up. Surrender means giving over. It means finally admitting that your way of trying to do this is not working. That trying harder, being more disciplined, having more willpower, this strategy, if it was going to work, would have worked by now. But it's failed every time for years. And so surrender is about saying, this strategy does not work. So I'm going to give over the sense of control over this problem that I actually do not have, and I'm going to open myself up to receive a new solution, a new method, a new way of getting this problem solved. Surrender means acknowledging this is not a fight that I can win on my own, that I cannot willpower my way through this, that I need a new solution, that I need a different approach, that I need help. And that admission is not weakness. And secondly, connection is the antidote to addiction. Said another way, addiction is not a willpower deficiency disorder. It is a connection deficiency disorder. So what recovery looks like is not sobriety. It's not depriving yourself of pornography. It's actually about finally getting connected in the ways that you need to be connected. When you break out of these patterns of disconnection and isolation and you learn how to connect to yourself, how to heal what has kept you from being connected to yourself, how to connect to others, and how to heal the obstacles that are preventing you from having the kind of connection with others that you need. When you start to connect to a higher sense of meaning and transcendent purpose in your life, then everything will start to shift at a dramatic and deep level. The shame starts to dissolve, the compulsion will lose its grip and evaporate. The power to stay sober will finally appear, and it doesn't feel like war. It feels like peace. If you've been fighting this alone for too long and your journey to quit this problem still feels like war, and you answered in the white knuckling category for all of the questions that I asked in this video, if you're ready to surrender and you're ready to try something different that actually works, then I want to help you. Click the link in the description and book a consultation call with me. On that call, we'll have a conversation about what is going on for you, what's keeping you stuck, and whether the comprehensive approach that has worked for me and that is inside of my program will work for you too. Remember, you are not a bad person here to get good. You are a sick person here to get well. The connection that can save you and get this problem solved begins with one brave decision to reach out. So click the link below, book that call, and let's get you out of the war and into real recovery. I hope you got some value out of this video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.